Oh, John. What can you please? Now you've got your red tie on, man. What's going on? You haven't joined Labour, I mean.
It's Christmas.
All right, fair enough. I'll let you get off with that. That's good. Waspy women. Yet another, what I call group bedrock of our society. He's alienated pensioners. He's alienated waspy women. He's alienated farmers. He's alienated Brexiteers by his surrender squad going to Brussels yesterday. In your opinion, and you were an MP for many, many years, is this man out of his depth, completely and utterly deaf, or on some mission that we don't really understand? Because it seems to me that on a daily and weekly basis, he seems to be alienating millions and millions and millions of people, Sir John Redwood.
Yeah, I think he's out of his depth. He obviously has no political judgment. I think this is a man who was a clever public sector lawyer, and he's still thinking like an international lawyer, and that's what he does, and that's what he is. And so let's give the Chagos Islands away because some international lawyers think we should. What about the British national interests? What about the essential requirements of the American naval base, which is more difficult if you've given it to a friend of China? And then it's, let's give some money to the EU, because wouldn't it be nice if they said nice things about us? But he doesn't have a strategy for what he wants to get out of the EU, and it looks as if he's going to surrender most of the things that they want, which we shouldn't be surrendering. And so he takes these very legalistic views and forgets about the British people, and he should be the advocate of all of us. He's our Prime Minister. We want him to do well, and instead he does badly, and as you rightly say, he picks on group after group after group to rob us, to pillage us, to take our money, to do things we don't want him to do, and to give parts of our country away to foreign interests.
And does he not believe, again, you are an elected representative, does he not understand, Sir John Redwood, that, I mean, in my mind, I could be wrong, I don't think pensioners will ever forget it. I think it'll be like Thatcher's poll tax. I don't think waspy women will ever forget a man in 2022 said, we will compensate these women. It is a massive injustice. I don't think that people who voted to leave the EU are going to forgive a man quite patently destined to get us closer. I don't think farmers, I've seen them in Westminster, they'll never forgive Sir Keir Starmer. So he has a political death wish, because the way it's going now, maybe I'm wrong, maybe the person who rang yesterday is right when they said the Tory party and Reform will bite lumps out of each other, they will deny each other a victory, and Starmer will get in again in 5 years via the back door.
No, we've never seen a government bomb so comprehensively in 5 months, tear up the rather few promises it made in the election and do the opposite of what we thought they were going to be doing. We thought they weren't going to change the things that people liked. We thought they were going to change the things that people didn't like.
Yeah.
They implied they were going to control migration. Well, they're not. And they don't seem to have a plan for it. They implied that they wanted to grow the economy faster. It happened the first half of this year to be the fastest growing G7 economy.
Not now.
A disappointing period. And instead, they completely undermined the growth strategy. They've taken the growth down to zero. And now today, the inflation, which obviously destabilised the last Conservative government, and they got blamed for it. A lot of it was actually responsibility of the Bank of England, but governments take the blame. They implied that they knew how to control inflation. Inflation has gone up ever since they arrived, and it is quite persistent. And the headline figure is 2.6. They inherited 2%. But if you look at the wider figure, which includes housing, and we all have housing costs, that's 3.5%. Now, that's a long way above the 2%, which they implied.
In 5.5 short months.
So get a grip. And why is housing going up so much? It's because far too many people are coming into this country that need housing. And at the same time, the Labour government is making it more difficult for landlords. So a lot of small landlords are saying, I can't be bothered with this. It's too difficult, too expensive. They're taxing me too much. So supply goes down, demand goes up. You've got inflation in housing, Labour. Fix it.
What's your view of Badenoch so far? She seems to have his measure at Prime Minister's question times. Not so sure there's enough meat on the bone. It's all about Reform and Nick Candy and possibly Elon Musk. What do you make, firstly, of Kemi Badenoch, the new Conservative leader, Sir John?
Well, I think they were right to have an important debate on farmers. You are right to stress it. The small family farms are crucial to what food we do grow in this country, and they're dishing out subsidy to stop people growing food, mainly to larger farmers. And now they're trying to undermine those farming businesses and make them have to sell up rather than pass them on down the generations. That was the big lead that Kemi gave. And today she was right to go on the pensioners and people being cold over Christmas. And with the Christmas song that some media won't promote being very popular with the public, it reinforces just how strongly we all feel about it. Why pick on the poorer pensioners and take their grant away? And why do they not know the answer to Kemi's very good question about if you give some of those pensioners a benefit 8-10 times as much as the one you're withdrawing and leave most of the rest without the benefit, could you end up with a lot of cold pensioners and no savings as well? I mean, that would be monumental incompetence.
Or as many of us think here, what about the 13 billion you're giving in foreign aid? 4.3% of that budget would actually be paying for that £300 winter fuel allowance. I find that astonishing. And of course, 10 years ago, you couldn't say that. You'd be called every name under the sun. And I'm not. I absolutely appreciate that we should do what we can. We did it with Ukraine. But I'll tell you something, we need to look after our own, Sir John. And I genuinely believe, whether it's Kemi Badenoch or whether it's Nigel Farage or somebody else, in a minute, not just because of Starmer, people are fed up. They're fed up of living their lives correctly and paying their tax and never asking for a handout, never breaking the law. And the first time it becomes hard, it's not racist. You see people coming to this country ending up in hotels. You see prisoners being released with Gucci bags and new trainers. And if you're stuck in a traffic jam somewhere north of the Westminster bubble and you can't get home to see your kids before they go to bed, you're raging, John. And that for me is what this is all about. And I listen, whether it will be Kemi or Nigel, I have no idea, but somebody needs to. Can I just get a quick comment on you? Do you know this story about the Times newspaper? It's astonishing.
What's that?
The government has just now criticised Moscow's desperate rhetoric after a senior ally of Vladimir Putin threatened the Times newspaper over its coverage of the assassination of a Russian general. It was Lieutenant General Igor Krylov. The Times called him a legitimate act of defence, his death, by Ukraine. As a result, a security spokesman for, are you ready for this? This is extraordinary, for Vladimir Putin, has said, and I quote, that journalists at the Times, our sister paper, were legitimate military targets and should be very careful as anything goes in London. That's in the last 2 hours, Sir John Redwood. That is strong words from the Russians, isn't it?
Well, that's extremely worrying and obviously completely unacceptable.
Yep.
Because we need journalists who report things fearlessly and are allowed to make comments. But going back to your earlier point about why we're so frustrated with this government, there is money around and there are even easier targets than some of the ones you mentioned. I mean, why 19 billion on carbon capture and storage?
There you go.
Other countries are not doing this. It doesn't add to anything. It's going to make our energy dearer. Why are they deindustrializing our country so quickly by being extreme on net zero in a way which means you have more CO2 worldwide? Why aren't they getting to grips with the very poor productivity in the great public sector that they're meant to be managing? Why do they keep on dishing out big wage increases without any productivity deals? I'm all in favour of people earning lots of money, but you've got to work smarter to get the money. And instead, people work less smart and they get a bigger pay rise because they're in the public sector.
There are
many frustrating wastes of money that they ought to control so they can look after the pensioners and the farmers and all the other good causes.
Could not agree more. You have been my absolute revelation of the year. I'm definitely getting you in Panto next year, Sir John Redwood. But listen to this, because my voice is about to go.
Oh, no, you're not.
Oh, yes, I am. You told me that certain media outlets won't play the song. This, my friends, is a song by Sir Starmer and the Granny Harmers. This should be downloaded. If you get a chance, this needs to go to #1. The first ever politically motivated Christmas #1 will play out from Sir John for him. This is just a little feeling. Download it. Happy Christmas, Sir John Redwood.